This episode of the Neurodivergent Experience is brought to you by RTN Mental Health Solutions. With up to a 5-year waiting list for autism and ADHD assessments via the NHS, and that's even if you get a referral from your GP, getting an assessment in the UK has never been harder. So if you're like me and can't wait anymore, going private may be the best option for you. RTN offers online assessments for kids aged 6 right up to adults, with prices starting at £900. To make it more accessible, RTN can offer payment plans up to 5 months. You can access their remote services from the comfort of your home anywhere in the UK, and RTN offers group and one-to-one counselling, a private route to access ADHD medication following the assessment, and will even fight for you if your GP doesn't accept the results. So if you live in the UK and can't wait to get an assessment, go to www.rtnmentalhealthsolutions.com and use the discount code RTN23, making it even more affordable for all of our listeners to get an autism and ADHD assessment.
Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergent Experience. I'm your host, Jordan James, the neurodivergent specialist and photographer, and I'm joined by my co-host, fellow advocate and very best friend, Simon Scott.
Welcome to another episode. This week, we are talking about understanding the school system from an teacher's perspective.
That was a mouthful.
It was understanding the school system from an autistic teacher's perspective. I'll say it again because I got it wrong the first time.
Oh, that was a mouthful. To be fair, I didn't even know you got it wrong. I was just like, oh, wow, that was...
Oh, no, the rejection part of my brain was very aware I got it wrong. Don't worry.
Oh, right. I just thought that was some Dr. Zeus style, No. I was like, oh, what did he say?
Go forth, children. No, yeah, so if you're wondering why I sound weird or I sound out of tune, it's because I'm not in my usual setup. I know, break of routine, stressful. And then none of my kit wanted to work because I'm at my parents' house dog-sitting their little furry boy Pip. And my routine's changed. I'm not stressed. How are you?
I'm ill.
Great.
Yeah, I've had 2.5 hours sleep on my settee. I worked last night, so I did a 12-hour shift, came back, and I fell asleep for like a couple of hours on the settee, and now I'm doing this. And as usual, I'm in that perpetual state of ill / tired / oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But I didn't want to cancel. I didn't want to not be here, despite the fact that everything seems to be going wrong. Because my friend Mandy, who is also known as the Autistic teacher on Facebook, and we've actually met in real life. We're not just Facebook friends. We're friends.
Oh, real friends. That's nice.
Well, I hope we will be by the end of this.
Okay.
I hope we will be by the end of this, because we are here to discuss educational system and the fact that a lot of teachers get a lot of bad rap and get the blame for a lot of stuff that they shouldn't be. It's the teachers are out there doing their job and they're getting blamed for a lot of things going wrong when a lot of the time it isn't actually the teacher's fault. Of course it is.
I'll put my hand up to that. I have had some amazing teachers in my life, but unfortunately, like with a lot of things, I sometimes focus on only the negative experiences, and I do give teachers a bad rep, even though I know very little about them or know many of them. So I'm looking forward to having my opinions changed, definitely.
Yeah, my kids had some really fantastic teachers that actually, without those teachers, they would never have passed the subjects they were particularly struggling in. Yeah. With my daughter, it was her English teacher. She was absolutely amazing. This is before anyone knew that my daughter was autistic. She just treated her, as an individual, and she was such a great teacher. And the other was my son's maths teacher. My son went from a level something. Essentially, it was like a D, and then he eventually got a B plus on his GCSE because of this particular teacher. So, absolutely, we're going to focus on the positives and how teachers can work within the current system, where however you want to judge, however the current system is, we want to focus on what teachers are doing to improve their classrooms. And there's no one better in my mind than Mandy. Mandy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you. End of term.
Good.
End of term 1. It's a long term for teachers. But yeah, end of the term now.
Burnout. It's
Burnout season.
Yeah, that's it.
I always forget. That's like a thing nowadays, because my kids are old now, because I'm old, and they're well, my daughter's at uni, and Simon's already passed all that, and he's got a job now and paying rent, because he should do. Yeah, make him pay rent. That's what I say. But it's not a lot.
No, I'm joking. I'm just joking.
But yeah, so Mandy, no. Forgot it.
No.
What am I doing?
Great. Wonderful.
No, what am I talking? Right. Yes. Sorry, Mandy. What is your job at this current moment in time?
At this point, so I am the teacher in charge or lead teacher of an SRP, which is a specialised resource provision for autistic children in a primary school. So it's slightly different to a specialist school, as it's attached to a mainstream school, but as it's a specialist resource provision, we have flexibility and smaller classes to bespoke the curriculum really to each individual child. But I've also been, for most of my career, a mainstream teacher. Specialising in challenging behaviour and neurodivergent children. Yeah, I've been teaching for quite a few years. I started 27 years ago. I've been an acting Senko, a behaviour manager, whatever one of them is, senior leadership. So yeah, I've had a lot of jobs in a lot of schools.
So when did you find out that you were autistic?
It was a later diagnosis, but after my kids, I think it kind of intertwines with my profession as well. So I started teaching in a mainstream school and was almost introduced to autism, as there was an SRP in the school that I was working in. And there were these children that were supposed to be different in this SRP. And I really connected with them. I thought, this is brilliant. Absolutely loved them. And then, you start as a teacher, you start not necessarily specialising, but trying to understand more. So then I moved schools, then again specialised, became acting Senko. And then I had my own children, literally all at the same time. And then my children started getting diagnosed autistic. And I'm kind of, I know how to deal with this because I've done it on a professional level. But to be a parent of autistic children is completely different. But I could use some of those skills and talents that I'd learned in school. So I was kind of, okay, we can do a visual timetable because I'd done that in school. So I was doing that at home as well. But I think going through it personally with your own children, you understand how different all of these children are. Whereas in school, it had been kind of a textbook type child at that point, but we're talking quite a few years ago. So I had 3 children that were all very, very different, sort of a PDA approach, global developmental delay approach, and the very clever, wanting to know the why, just all completely different approaches that I was having to use with my own children. And so seeing that, and then all the, different talks with the paediatricians and all of different meetings you go to, and I'm kind of, that's not that different because I used to do that. And you kind of then reflect on yourself. So for me, it was a later diagnosis after recognizing a lot of myself in my own children.
Once you had been diagnosed, because obviously you had your kids and you that would have affected the way you were teaching and treating individual children that you were in charge of. But when you actually knew you were autistic, did that then change your approach again towards the autistic students?
Not so much, no. You would think it would, but it didn't really. I think it was more the fact that because I had 3 very different autistic children, I kind of, at that point, started realising that autism is not a one-size-fits-all, which, if you have training on autism, they may say, everyone's different, but I was living it, and that made a big difference to me. So obviously I've spent a lot of time in mainstream schools, but for me, specialising with autistic children is kind of dream for me because I get it. I want to understand them. It's my thing. So, that's why really, I guess I have specialised in autistic children, but to have just classes of just autistic children for me, and to be able to tweak the curriculum to a level that they can understand with, full of movement breaks and all of that is perfect. So yeah, that's why really.
See, that is a big question. Scotty?
Yeah, I'm interested to know, Mandy, how big is a class for you at school now? So when I imagine like a specialist school, because I imagine that I know absolutely nothing. It might not take a lot of imagination. But when I imagine a school size, for me, a classroom was either 40 kids, or when I went to a school that was more suited to me, it was around 15, 16 kids. So how many kids are you actually working with on a day-to-day basis in your school routine?
So in the UK, a mainstream school, a class size would normally be around 30 children. That's your norm kind of thing, is around 30 children. It obviously varies on school. If you've got a rural school or something like that, you may have smaller classes. Private schools, again, will have smaller class sizes. For a specialist setting, a special school, it can vary, but you've usually got around 10 children per class. I'm in a specialist resource provision, so that's how to describe it. It's special classrooms within a mainstream school or attached to a mainstream school. So they are smaller class sizes, usually around 10 to 15 children in a class. But they have the advantage of then being able to go into mainstream lessons with support. But you access specialist schools and you access SRPs with an EHCP.
Right, so
if that makes sense. Is that another acronym?
Yeah. For the listeners, what does EHCP stand for?
So an EHCP is an education healthcare plan. So that would be accessed via the local authority or via the SENCO. But a lot of children don't need an EHCP or need the specialist setting if your classroom, you can have a classroom of 30, is neurodivergent. If you can have little tweaks, little things within your classroom in a mainstream setting that help all your neurodivergent children.
What would you suggest?
There's lots of things that you can do.
So if you have a teacher that's listening or a head teacher that's listening, and I'm sure they're out there, what would you suggest within the current, parameters of being able to make change? What would you suggest the sort of changes that they could make to make it a more neurodivergent friendly atmosphere for their neurodivergent students in mainstream school?
I mean, there's absolutely loads of things that you can do. First and foremost, like I said earlier, it's getting to know each individual children because they're all completely different. So it's getting to know the children in your class. So it's absolutely relationship first, because the needs of those children and the support that they need is going to be completely different. But there's lots of different things you can think about. So you can think about the seating. So if you've got children that are sensitive to light or sun or heat, then don't place them next to a radiator, or don't place them next to a window. Or if they're sensitive to noise, don't place them in a noisy part of the classroom. Put them somewhere quieter. So just the actual plan of the classroom itself and who they're next to is really, really important. And that's getting to know the children. Then the actual seats themselves. So you can get elastic bands that go on around the legs of chairs, which, if you've got ADHD, restless leg, any of that, you can bounce on those, and it helps give you that. It helps give you that sensory feedback. Then there's wobble cushions, which again, it's all about the sensory feedback. If a wobble cushion helps, and they can move on the wobble cushion, and you often know the children that need that from very early age because they're sitting on the carpet and they're doing this, because they're wanting that extra sensory feedback. So all of these things, and that's just the seating. Then you can think about the environment. Okay, is it a quieter classroom because some of these children are not going to cope with all the noise? And just the approach to ear defenders. So I've always, even in a mainstream class, had ear defenders readily available. And if the class gets too noisy, I'll put some on too, so they know it's not just them. This is just
so
an approach.
nice.
It's too noisy for me. I'm going to have the ear defenders on too, so that they don't feel singled out. And that's when you realise that some children...
Yeah, they don't feel like the odd one out.
Yeah, absolutely. And some children will try on the ear defenders, and they've not got a diagnosis, but actually for them it really helps, because we're not just thinking in a classroom about autism, but you're thinking about lots of different people, lots of different neurotypes. It's a neurodivergent, divergence classroom. So yeah, and that's the environment. Then you've got the lighting, what kind of lights have you got in the classroom? I will quite often dim the lights or have just one light on rather than all of the lights, just to make it that little bit less intense. The blinds down in the summer, because obviously you've got the sun coming through. So you've got all these different sensory things. Then you've got the processing. So when you're asking a question, then give them time to answer. Then you've got different children who might need that advance notice. So if you've got someone in your class who takes a little bit longer to process, then you're like, I'm coming to you next. And you let them know that so that they can think of what they're going to say. Or if it's a child who's going to get really anxious, then you don't say that, because they'll be sitting there worrying about what you're going to ask them. I've had various different children, some children who are situational mute as well, and they don't want to speak. And I've had a green or red card on their desk, one of these that you can flip over, and it's green if they're happy to talk to you, and red actually if they're not in a place when they want to be asked a question, so that you can just skip over them, because that then just reduces the anxiety, so they're not worried. It gives them the autonomy and control to decide when to speak, when not to speak. Just about making that environment a bit more inclusive, for all children.
I have one of those at work. It's just, I was excited about your idea, and I was like, I actually have like an octopus that you can turn inside out,
I've got one
and he
of
either
those
has a
as well.
frown. Yeah, he has a frowny face or a happy face. So when I'm at work, if I want people to leave me alone, I'll put him on the frowny face, and everybody knows, unless it's an emergency, because obviously I'm in charge. But like, if it's not an emergency, ask someone else. And if it's happy face, which it is a lot of the time, I'm very happy. Most people don't believe me, but I am. It's a happy face. It's like a pink one. And I love it. It's such a good idea. Were you able
They're
to
just
implement?
simple things.
Oh, exactly. This is the thing, is that you might have a million things, but they're so easy to implement. I'm going to get on to why I believe that it's really, really difficult to do those things in just a second. I just wanted to know, did you... were you able to implement at least some of these, if not more of them, in the mainstream school?
Absolutely. Even things like questioning. So if you you're asking everyone a question. We all 30 children had whiteboards so that they could write their answer on a whiteboard and they could show me their answer rather than speaking it.
Wow.
So there's lots of different things you can do.
See, what I love about this is the fact that you're just saying, look, just do it. Like it's so easy to do, and yet the problem is that a lot of people they don't know to do these things. So it's not even like, oh, there's a terrible teacher that doesn't want to implement. It's like, let's bring back the cane sort of thing. It's not that. It's the fact that they just don't know about these things. So you speaking about it, you implementing it. You're showing that you can bring this positive change. And by the way, nothing that you do to enhance the experience of the neurodivergent people in your class, does it take anything away from the neurotypical children? Does it harm them in any way or make their experience worse?
I think by having an inclusive classroom, it helps and benefits everybody.
Exactly.
It really does, because people are all so very different. And it even shows them and teaches them how to be inclusive.
This is wonderful. And you've almost answered the question I was going to ask you, is surely the neurotypical children must benefit from the elements that you're added into the classroom, because neurotypical people can still struggle from extreme social anxiety, whether they're verbal or non-verbal. And I know for a fact that there are certain people out there that I work with that are neurotypical that would benefit from the smiley sad octopus system or writing their answers on a whiteboard. But what I'm interested to know, Mandy, is how common is this now in a variety of schools? But your school specifically sounds... It fills me with joy. It brings me a lot of hope to know that people like you are out there and implementing these things. But how common is it in the school system? Is it more specifically schools that have the adjacent unit, or if that isn't available, what opportunities is happening in schools for these changes to be made?
To have an SRP really depends on the local authority, and I know that the local authority, certainly by us, they would like to have and like to see more SRPs attached to schools. It's not a school decision; it's higher up than that. It's your local authority, and I know access to an SRP can be difficult because it's through an EHCP, which are difficult to get. So I think it's really important that the mainstream classes are inclusive, because the majority of autistic children will be in mainstream schools. But having said that, there's a lot more inclusivity, there's a lot more ideas, there's a lot more training that's meaningful, a lot more people that understand, but it is still growing, and it does depend on the school you're at. Some schools are better at this than others, as with anything. And so it's not every school, but it's getting better.
I've obviously, on our pages, we get a lot of comments and a lot of messages, and I've actually noticed like that there's a more positive vibe coming, as far as like the school system. Obviously people are still going astray, and I do think a lot of it comes down to, like I said, it's not the individual teachers. I don't even think it's down to the individual schools a lot of the time. I think that it's the system in general that is stopping the change that people really want to happen. So I think that it's like, even though you can do small things to help, and the crazy thing is like you were saying, the small things that you're doing to help, if a kid doesn't have a diagnosis or doesn't have an EHCP, which nowadays is very, very likely, because, you have to be on the list for like 3, 4, 5 years with the NHS to get a diagnosis. So what about all those kids that are sitting there on the list not getting seen, not getting treated differently because they don't have an EHCP or they don't qualify and all this stuff. And it's like, but if you just implement those very simple to make changes, you'll be helping them as well. They shouldn't need a piece of paper. They shouldn't need an acronym in order to have an education. It should be education for all. And this is equality through equity. And it's something that I've always championed, is equality through equity. Now, I just hope parents of neurotypicals listen to this, because it's not like all these kids are out there going, oh, I want something special. They just want an education like everyone else, and their parents want their kids have an education just like everyone else. And because we are different, we have differently wired brains. I've said this a million times, and each one of those is different. So each person with a different wired brain has a different wired brain. Like you said about individuality, it takes very little effort in order to get to know people to make those changes, but it has such a huge impact for positivity. And the thing is, you know, I do feel like the system overall kind of makes us stand out. It's almost like, oh, that's the autistic one. Oh, that's the problem. And I think that when I say the system, I think this is like society's way of looking at autism in general. That's what needs to change, is rather than seeing our kids, rather than seeing us as the problem, they need to see further that what benefits you'll get from not putting a child through a traumatic experience in school is that they will get a good education, and what they can achieve might be absolutely awesome, because throughout history, that's what neurodivergent people have done. But we always seem to have done it because we had to fight. Do you know what I mean? Like, why does everything have to be a fight?
I think the system is one thing where, you know, it needs more flexibility hugely, and you've got then expectations on teachers and attendance and levels. There is all of that, but I think within that you can still have an inclusive classroom. I've never had complaints from sort of neurotypical parents, but I think that's because it's anybody. If that's your need, then let's meet that need. It doesn't matter who you are. You know, if you need it, perhaps with Erlins, if you need a green piece of paper, you get a green piece of paper. If you are sensitive to noise, you get ear defenders. You need sensory breaks, go run across the playground, come back. And that's just been on a needs basis rather than any kind of diagnosis or label. Just, you know, if that's what you need, that's what we do.
Yeah, and
I think when you're meeting those needs, then who actually can complain? Because all you're doing is meeting the needs of the children within that class.
I have to ask you, Mandy. I'm very interested by this. A little bit about me. I'll retell the listeners if you've heard before. If not, but I was taken out of school when I was around 7-8 years old, because I was really, really struggling in that school, and my parents had to commute nearly an hour down the road back, so a 2-hour commute there and back to take me to a school that worked for me and was doing similar things to what you're doing. And I really do wonder where I would be if I'd stayed in that school. And we do have a lot of parents that listen to this show, and I'm interested to know, Mandy, if you're a parent of an ND child, or whether they've been diagnosed or not, and they are struggling in a school that doesn't have what you're offering at your school, what would you suggest to them? Would you suggest try and find the correct school? Would you say try and change the school by speaking to them? What is the solution? Because my parents still question whether they did the right thing.
I think the first thing to do would be to speak to the teacher about the needs of the child within that class. speak to the Senko, speak to the people in the school that the child is at. What can they do within that school environment in order to meet the needs of the child? So your first thing is to talk to the people involved. I think moving a child is quite drastic. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it is that another school is better suited. But I would always try within that school first. And maybe it is that it's a different school is needed, because schools are all different. Children are all different. One school that works for one child might not work for another child. But yeah, I would always speak to the people involved first. Have they tried little changes? Have they tried different seating, different environments, sensory breaks, movement breaks, processing? Have they tried all of those things? So yeah, I would speak to them first.
I wanted to talk about this whole thing about school refusal. So just the wording is wrong, because I don't think these kids, the neurodivergent kids, are refusing to go to school. I think they're terrified. They are too scared. And I'll be honest, that was me. When I was a kid, I was bullied so badly that I literally I didn't come out of my room for 3 months, only to go to the toilet, and that was it. I'd eat my room. I literally became almost agoraphobic because of the fear of going outside, because of the bullying experience I had in school. And I was bullied by the teachers. I was bullied by pupils, but then I was bullied by my parents. So to be honest, I didn't have anywhere safe except my room, which is why I didn't come out of it. But it wasn't that I didn't want to learn. And I think this is the thing that seems to be misconstrued, is that they're saying these kids don't want an education. They're saying no, they don't want to go to school because they're lazy, or they just want to play games, or there's always these excuses. And literally, I've spoken to quite a few parents who are going through this, and they're being fined now because their kids won't go to school, because the issue is that they're blaming the parents or they're blaming the kid. But in my mind, it's like, well, actually, if the school was like your school and the teacher was like you, those kids probably would want to go. And if they didn't, then you could look at, might be another reason. Maybe it's PTSD, maybe it's trauma, maybe they just don't want to. Maybe they'd rather play video games and that's their hyper focus, and they can't do that at school, so they don't want to go to school. That might be the reason, but that isn't always the reason. And that always seems to be blamed, and like, oh, that kid just doesn't want to go to school, when it's not the case. Have you ever experienced kids like being absent for long periods of time in mainstream or in your new school?
Absolutely. I mean, it happens all the time. And I think it comes down to, well, there's a number of things it comes down to, but even my own daughter, we just had COVID and a lot of lessons were done online. And she was absolutely loving being in her own environment, learning online. And then at the end of COVID, we had to go back to the classroom. She's like, well, why? Because I'm learning just fine in my own space at home. And I think that's similar for a lot of, especially our neurodivergent children. I think the environment does have a huge just importance in, is it the right environment for them to learn at? And it comes down to the system and the flexibility or lack of flexibility within the system, that not every school is right for every child. It's a really, really difficult one. I have come across it. Of course I have. I've made certain adaptations for various children. So some children prefer they like a job and they like some responsibility. So like, kind of, when you come in, this is going to be your special job. And they love that sort of responsibility, and they feel it's better to come in in order to do that rather than just straight in. Other children, I used to have, I've not needed it in the last couple of years, but used to have what we called in class a transition table. And the kids would come in and they would sit at the table and there would be zero demands, nothing, didn't even have to take their bag off. They would sit there until they were ready to come inside the classroom.
Oh,
It's all just part of that transition and processing.
That is so good.
Another child I've had, her thing was sort of cartoons. And so, but she didn't, it was noise, it was everything. Her place to go was under a table, which sounds terrible, but it really worked for her. And she had cartoons, literally I stuck them onto the bottom of the table underneath so that she could come in and she would lie on the floor just to look at those until she was in a right place to learn.
Mandy,
but even then, like
Mandy, when I have grandchildren, I might just hire you as my own personal teacher for my grandchildren. I'll be like, "Where's Mandy?" Like we're sending our kids there.
Even then, there are children that still really struggle, and I get that. Attendance is great because they do learn in school, absolutely, but I would love to see more flexibility within that.
Yeah, because my own daughter, when she did her GCSEs, she had a 60% attendance record. Now, I'd already gone into the school and had a conversation with them about, that I was diagnosed and she was in the process. By the way, she was on the list and she never even got diagnosed as a child. By the time she actually got diagnosed, she'd swapped over to the adult because she'd passed the age of 18. So she was on the list for like 3 years, then became 18, then was on the adult list, and then was swapped, then couldn't get it through the adult list, and then we had to go private. She never ended up getting a diagnosis through the NHS because it just took so long. But her school was actually understanding to a certain extent. They didn't really understand, but they were understanding, which was good enough. And they actually, they would have to send me these letters of she's only got this, there was a possibility you could be fined. And I used to rip them up and throw them in the bin. And I used to call them and say, stop sending me letters, because if you want to take me to court, good luck with that. But they were actually super cool. And they were like, actually, we don't want to take you to court. We have to send these letters out because they get generated automatically. Like if your kid goes below a certain attendance, this is what they told me. I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what they said. It gets generated automatically and they have to send it out. But they literally said, just ignore it. Because the fact is if Sophie's grades were suffering, then they have to then do something about it. But she was actually thriving. Her grades were soaring. And this was another thing that I wanted to bring up is, you're going to have to remind me what it's called. When they first go from primary school to secondary school, they get given a level. Is it the SATs?
SATs level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just stuck with her. So because obviously, she was at primary school and, she had her special interests and it wasn't maths and science, and she had different special interests like drama and art. She got these super low levels in the maths and science. And she had to work super hard in order to get those up. And they even wanted to put her in the remedial maths and science and English, despite the fact that she's an incredible writer. And she just went, that's not happening. And I went, wherever you want. And I paid for tutors for each one of those subjects, just for her. So she'd have tutoring 3 times a week, just on those subjects, just so she could reach the better level. And then she ended up getting all A's. They said the highest she could get was a C. They completely underestimated her because of these SATs. And then she ended up getting all A's, and she was in the local newspaper as the most improved student in the whole of West Sussex. Not just her school, the whole of West Sussex, the most improved student. And that was with a 60% attendance rate. My daughter's living proof
I've got a master's degree. I got 80% overall, and I had a 65% attendance.
There you go. Living proof, which is phenomenal. Like, there is different ways of learning. Of course, that doesn't work for all kids. Some kids might find it like a super distraction at home. I mean, I probably would have. But, you know, school isn't for everyone. But it is, the thing is, if you provide the right schooling, then everyone can enjoy it and everyone can have that right to education. But what do you think of this SATs thing? I don't really understand it. It's kind of like just tarring a kid with a brush right when they're, you know, so small, so young.
And the SATs are really a way of levelling the school more than the child. But they are often used in secondary schools as a predictor for GCSEs. But I think you have to, again, you've got to have that understanding that children change. Children develop at different rates. I've had a child at a year 4, so he would have been age 8-ish, who really struggled to write a sentence, really struggled. I'm like, oh, goodness, you know, what else can I try to get this child to understand how to write a sentence? And he is now a doctor. So, you know, children develop at different rates when it's right for them. And I think, again, there needs to be flexibility with things like predicting with their SATs that actually, you know, we do, like your daughter, learn at different rates in different ways. And there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all.
Couldn't have put it better myself. That's absolutely perfect. I'm just very, very thankful that you've joined us today. And I think that just, you know, speaking from experience, just talking about like what you've done from an individual perspective, I think that anyone listening can take a lot away from that. And the fact is that you've done those things and they've worked out. They've been successful. So there's no reason why other people can't follow in your footsteps. And I really, really hope they do. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. I'm sure there are going to be so many people out there that listen to this, Mandy, and feel positive that these little changes are coming, because we discussed it on air. I'm not a parent. I do have the anxiety of sending a child, especially my own, to school, because I didn't have necessarily the best school experience. But knowing that there are teachers like you out there and there are changes coming has filled me with a lot of hope. So thank you very much for that.
Separately, do you know how to fill an EHCP in? Like, would you be able to guide someone into being able to do that?
There's different sections to an EHCP, and the SENCO is the person that has to fill in the majority of it because it's based in an educational setting.
Okay.
So they need educational evidence.
Right. I just thought maybe we could do a future episode on EHCPs, like and like who like just to help people out there, because to be honest, when my kids were younger, I knew they needed help, but I had no idea what an EHCP. No one ever said that to me. So my kids never had. Yeah,
really?
Literally, there are so many people out there that have no idea what an EHCP is, because there are a lot of, and you know, like I said, this isn't all. This is some of the schools that I have experienced actually ignore the EHCP. So I've had parents say they have an EHCP, and there are schools that literally ignore it completely.
See, an EHCP is a legal document. They're not allowed to ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're breaking the law, but they are the school, and they intimidate the parents who are also neurodivergent. And this is an unfortunate thing that is happening in some, let me be clear, some schools. This is happening where parents are just feeling bullied. They're feeling intimidated by the school. So they're going and talking to the SEN, and the SEN is making them feel like they're the ones with the problem.
Like with my parents, the teacher said to them at 7 years old, "Sorry, Mrs. Scott, I've got 30 other kids that I need to look after. If you don't like it, take it to another school." So they did.
Well, let's hope anybody listening to this understands that you can make those changes without ruining your school. It will only make things better.
It will
only make things better. And yeah. So let's do it. Let's make things better. Let's all come together.
We'll try our best to. I don't know about you guys. I am feeling quite low on my spoons now, Jordan.
Fresh out of spoons. Let's do my quote of the week. I'm so tired. I just want to go to bed now.
Is that it? Is that the quote? All that fanfare for that?
Well, to be fair, I was looking for one, and you started the music, so I was like, right. I'll just crack on then.
I should have given you a moment's notice. Shouldn't I?
That's fine. I think I'm tired. I need to go to bed. That is my quote. That should just be my lifetime. Is just I'm tired. I need to go to bed.
Yes, we'll add it to our repertoire of T-shirts. We'll stick it on the back of one somewhere. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Why not? We'll run with that. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us. Anybody that is interested in your work, should we send them to your Facebook page, The Autistic Teacher?
Or Instagram?
Wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
And Instagram.
Cool. And Instagram, yeah. We'll put all of your links in the description so that people can go and find you. And I hope this episode has helped you listening, because it certainly helped me today. I feel like I've been a listener with this one. It's been wonderful. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe. Continue to follow us on social media at the Neurodivergent Pod. And while you're at it, guys, if you've listened to this episode and you've listened to a few others and you really, really like them, do us a favour. Go on Spotify or an Apple Podcasts and give it a rate. We're purely 5-star rated across the board at the minute, but I want more. So please go out there and give the podcast a rating, because it will help people find us. Because when we talk about the things we're talking about today, we need as many people to hear these sorts of conversations as possible. So be a dear.
And put some comments.
And share and leave us some comments. There's been some wonderful comments on some previous episodes. Jordan and I are going to be doing a Q&A episode soon. So we'll be answering all of your questions and comments. So thank you very much for listening and listening to me waffle on at the end. And I love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.